to this meeting. I thank SRG Ziade for her detailed briefing. Mr. President, let me start with some good news, despite a somewhat blurred horizon during these last months. In January next year, the people of Kosovo will, like every other nation in the continent, enjoy the freedom of movement in the Schengen area, a process long overdue. Visa liberalization and increased human mobility have proven to have a huge transformative power anywhere they have been applied. This is part of the rapprochement with the EU's freedoms and its core values, which Kosovo, a functioning and ever-strengthening democracy, has fully embraced. Mr. President, when we speak about the still unresolved relations between Kosovo and Serbia, and after the divergent views that we heard here from some speakers, it is always important to put things in the right context. In a not too distant past, Kosovo and Serbia have been part of an ensemble that no longer exists. The dissolution of the former Yugoslavia was cruel and brutal. The Kosovo chapter of that dissolution in 1999 had nothing in common with a difficult divorce. The separation of Kosovo and Serbia went through the worst: war crimes and crimes against humanity, the death of countless civilians that mass graves continue to reveal to this day, through mass torture and widespread rape that can never be forgotten. It required an international intervention to stop atrocities and open a new page for the entire region. Needless to say, it has left behind bitter memories that are hard to erase, wounds not easy to heal, and scars that are still visible, including as many as 1,600 persons still unaccounted for. It is undeniable. In the course of the last 2 decades, the region has gone a long way to overcome the demons of the past. It has largely succeeded, but there is still a lot of work to do. I was sincerely surprised to listen, and to say the least, to listen to the Prime Minister about her analysis on the situation in Kosovo. I checked the title of the meeting to make sure that we were not by any twist of chance in a meeting about Syria. None of these 3 elements that you mentioned, Prime Minister, is reflected, as you said, in the report of the Secretary General. None of them in the report of the OSCE, and none of them in the ULX report. And they all live, work in Kosovo. There may be problems and issues, of course, like everywhere, in all our countries, including for lack of wearing the seat belts or turning right to the signal. But no one can, in full honesty, deny that there are laws, modern laws, that there are institutions, democratic institutions, and there is due process equal for everyone in Kosovo today. Colleagues, no matter how hard we try, we cannot undo the past and its miseries. But despite everything, we must move on and be forward-looking. As President Osmani said, turning pain to strength. This has been and continues to be Albania's investment, not any fantasy, as we heard from the Russian colleagues, like Greater Albania or I don't know what. We don't want territory of the others, like some do. It is a fact that a quarter of a century later, the Western Balkans are no longer the Balkans. And Balkanization has been replaced with Europeanization because the region has reconnected with its core identity, which is Europe. And it is upon this conviction that I profoundly believe that despite the bitter past, the region has reached that transformative point when, in our part of Europe, like elsewhere in the continent, there is only talk of progress, cooperation, compromise, free movement and open spaces, connectivity with little of no borders, talk of a common destiny with far more positive prospects than warring aspects. For the first time in our long and troubled history, there is a clear pathway to a common future, individually and collectively, which was once again confirmed in the very convincing and committing way last week in Tirana during the 10th EU Western Balkan Summit in the framework of the Berlin process, the first ever held, organized outside the EU. We need to hold firm to it, not to let it slip, not to waste it. Precisely because if we don't, the demons of the past or any incomprehensible of the present may be tempted to jeopardize it. And let me briefly share my worry as well. As it was mentioned, on the 24th of September, Kosovo experienced what was thought inconceivable. The SRSG called it a security incident. The European Parliament qualified it in a resolution a terrorist act. A military command, a corps fully prepared and trained in Serbia, ready to fan the flames of the worst in the history of the Balkans, attacked Kosovo and its institutions and killed a police officer in the line of duty. Thanks to the prompt and professional intervention by the Kosovo police, the damage was contained and the terrorist mob was quickly pushed back. The more we learn about it, the more difficult it becomes not to see a pattern between these events and the déjà vu elsewhere. Remember the story of heavily armed men in help of a fabricated narrative of a discriminated minority. The enterprise failed miserably, and that is the positive side. But its intentions remained frightening nonetheless, and that is the deeply worrying side. There are no fighting sides, as we heard in this incident. There was a terrorist mob on one hand and the police of an independent country preserving law and order on the other. That has to be clear. So critical questions regarding their plans, preparations, training, support, financing need to be answered quickly and convincingly. Because explanations so far, including today, fall short of credibility. Even more so when criminals who should have been immediately condemned were rashly honored. Glorification of criminals, genocide denials, and efforts to revisit history are wrong and unacceptable. They undermine the principles of justice, ethics, and morality, and have detrimental effects on the society of the countries concerned as they run against reconciliation efforts. Therefore, a full and thorough investigation is needed, as called for by many, including my country, including a recent resolution of the European Parliament, so that the truth and responsibility are promptly and clearly established, perpetrators held to account, and make sure that no one thinks again to go down that slippery and dangerous slope. Mr. President, this is the last meeting on the issue during our term in the Council. Next year will mark a quarter of a century since Kosovo and Serbia parted their ways for good. They will never be under the same roof again. They will always be neighbors, and I hope and we work for good neighbors. Reconciliation is always an arduous and complex process. It must rely on goodwill and vision, but also on accountability and justice. It may be fragile, especially knowing that extremists surfing on populist narratives may try to derail it. In February last year, Kosovo and Serbia agreed to normalize relations with a binding agreement brokered by the EU, concluded in Ohrid and in Brussels. While implementation has been slow, we welcome the establishment of a joint monitoring committee. It should be fully functioning. And we welcome also the declaration on missing persons, a crucial process to bring closure to the pain of those concerned. The agreement must be implemented quickly and fully. Those who stand in the way of the process of the dialogue of normalization between Kosovo and Serbia must be resisted. Those who think that they can solve issues with manipulations, threat or war games must be sanctioned. And those who want to gamble and hijack the future of Serbia and Kosovo as neighbors living in peace and cooperation, which impacts the entire region, must be held to account. It is imperative to look forward, to project forward and move forward. And as we heard today by President Osmani, Kosovo is fully committed to implement the agreement by walking the extra mile in line with their Euro-Atlantic aspirations. We expect Serbia to do the same and in good faith for its own sake, that of the region, and for the future we all need and want. Mr. President, let me end by quoting John Fitzgerald Kennedy, who said that change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past are certain to miss the future. Too much time has been lost and too much precious time has been wasted. Failure to move on has a price, and the price tag will be billed to the next generation. The EU-mediated dialogue is therefore a priceless opportunity that is to the detriment of no one and to the benefit of all, Kosovo, Serbia, and the entire region. And I thank you.
I thank the representative of Albania.